What's up, Christ Center Mental Health community? This is me, David Lee Sarche, representing Christ Center Mental Health, the ministry where I talk about mental health awareness from a Christian perspective in order to give you real hope in the name of Jesus, to the glory of God the Father by the power of the Holy Spirit. Alright, as you can tell, this is going to be part 2 of my video series on my life testimony about how I came to know Christ. Before I get started, I just want to announce that this channel does have a Facebook page called the Christ Center Mental Health Discussion page that you can like and follow. It also has a Facebook group called the Christ Center Mental Health Facebook discussion group that you can join, and both of these serve the purpose of interacting with other subscribers, interacting with me, and giving me content ideas. So please check. I'm going to post the links in the description box below, and please check them out for yourself and like and follow the page and join the group. Alright, also I do want to say this video is going to potentially have some triggering stuff that I'm going to talk about. So if at any point you feel triggered, please feel free to stop watching the video. It won't hurt my feelings. I don't want you to be triggered, so like if you feel triggered at all, please feel free to stop. I'm gonna be talking about some sensitive stuff because there's been a lot of stuff that I've gone through in my life because of my mental illness, because of my mom's mental illness, and yeah, so this is gonna be uncensored pretty much. Also, I do want to say that I am going to talk about some things that's not going to paint my mom in the best of light, but I do want to say that I have a lot of deep love and respect for my mom. I know she did the best she can in raising me despite her illness that she had. My mom, for those of you that don't know, my mom suffered her whole entire life with schizoaffective disorder bipolar type, which is pretty much schizophrenia with a mood disorder. So, and she was unmedicated, so her mental illness, as time went on, her mental illness progressively got worse very rapidly. So I want you to keep this in mind. Anyway, so this is going to be, like I said, this is going to be part 2 of my video series on my life testimony. I decided to make this video because I did my life testimony in a long video, so if you want to watch the long video, you can feel free to go ahead and do that. But I decided to break this up into parts to make it easier for those of you that to want to watch it in parts. You could do that instead. So this is part 2. I suggest you watch part 1 of the series just so you can get everything in its full context. Alright, so let's get started. This is gonna start off. I remember shortly after sometime like in my 7th grade year, sometime in my 7th grade year, I came home from school one day to discover that my mom was sitting on the porch and she had bruises all over her. I didn't know what was going on. I asked her what happened, and she said that Mr. Robinson assaulted her, or she said Mr. Robinson beat her up, and I didn't know. At the time, I was like, I'm still very angry about it. Like when I think about it, like, I mean, that's my mom. It really, I mean, that memory, seeing my mom sitting on the front porch, all shaken up and everything, like, it really bothered me. Which, by the way, there was another incident. One of the times when my mom was in, I think she was in the psychiatric hospital. There was a time when my mom, my mom was in the psychiatric hospital, and Mr. Robinson came by the house, like, late at night to see my mom, and my stepdad answered the door, and Mr. Robinson asked for my mom, and my stepdad said she wasn't there and told him to get off his property. And like, this was one of the times I was very proud of my stepdad, because my stepdad, he wasn't a physically built person because he had what was called muscular dystrophy, so his muscles were deteriorating, so he was very skinny. But my stepdad really stood up to Mr. Robinson was a built man. And my stepdad really stood up to Mr. Robinson, despite the fact that Mr. Robinson probably would have hurt my stepdad. But my stepdad stood up to Mr. Robinson, and Mr. Robinson ended up leaving, like, because he didn't, my stepdad threatened to call the police. So Mr. Robinson left, and yeah, so that was a time I was actually kind of proud of my stepdad. But yeah, and then there was like I remember every summer my stepdad would take me and my mom on a road trip out to Ohio to see my sisters. Then we would go see my biological dad's parents. And then we would go see my stepdad's mom and sister in Tennessee. Like my sisters and my biological dad's parents lived in Ohio. And then we would drive down to Tennessee to go see my stepdad's mom and his sister. And then we drive back to Colorado. Well, this one summer in the seventh grade year, um, we drove out to Ohio to go see my sisters, and I didn't want to go see my grandparents or my stepdad's mom and sister in Tennessee. I wanted to stay another 2 weeks with my sisters, like to hang out with them. And my stepdad didn't want that. Like he and like so he forced me into the car, and we drove for a while, and I was crying and crying and crying the whole time because I kept on saying I wanted to see my sisters and I wanted to be with my sisters. And finally, my stepdad pulled over the car and turned around and like punched me in the arm a few times. And like my mom, she told my stepdad, okay, let's just let him stay with Virginia, which is one of my sisters. She said, let's just let him stay with Virginia for 2 weeks, and we'll just go see your mom and sister on our own. And so they drove me back to my sister Virginia's house, and I stayed with Virginia for an extra 2 weeks. Um, After that, like, and yes, like, and then after the 2 weeks, they sent me back home on a plane. But I remember during that 2 weeks, um, during that 2 weeks, we had a lot of fun. Like my sister took me to this place called COSI here in Toledo, which is a family fun center, and they did a lot of things with me during that time. And I remember on one of the Sundays there, they took me to their church, and I don't remember. I remember singing the church service. I don't really remember the sermon, but I remember after the sermon, the pastor gave an altar call, and my sister Virginia asked me if I wanted to go up and accept Christ into my heart. And I didn't understand what that meant at the time. Like I didn't get it, but I thought that's what my sister wanted. So I told her, sure. I told her, yes, I do. So she took me up to the altar, and as the pastor was praying over me, I looked around. I saw my sister crying, and I didn't get it. I didn't understand why she was crying because I was like, "Isn't this what she wanted? Why is she crying?" And so, but I noticed. I know looking back now that this was a defining moment in my life because this is when I really noticed God really acting in my life. But like so when I came home, I remember I was greeted with excitement from all my friends in the neighborhood. They were excited to see me, and um, but then that excitement was short lived because I remember shortly after I came back home, there was a time that my mom was on the phone one night, and I had this horrible habit of I remember I used to go on the phone that was downstairs in my room, and I pushed the mute button, and I would listen to my mom's phone conversations. Like when she was talking to her family back in Taiwan, I would listen to the phone conversations. And there was this one particular night, I was listening to my mom's phone conversation with the police dispatcher, and she was telling the police dispatcher that she wanted a police officer to come and talk to me about or talk not talk to me, but she wanted to come and give me and her both a lethal injection. And I didn't know what that was at the time, but I knew it had to do with death. So for some reason, I let go of the mute button, and I told the police dispatcher that I wanted to die too. And so the police dispatcher sent a police officer out right away to talk to the both of us. And the police officer asked me if I even knew what a lethal injection was, and I said no. And he pointed to his gun, which I found out later that that's not what a lethal injection is. But so I don't know why he pointed to his gun, but um, like my mom, he ended up taking my mom to the crisis unit, and I thought he was taking my mom to kill her. So I remember I kept on telling my stepdad that I wanted to die with my mom, and um, eventually my stepdad ended up calling the police back, and the police came and they took me to the crisis unit, and um, yeah, so they evaluated me. They evaluated me and decided that I needed to go to the Pueblo State Hospital for which was a psychiatric hospital. And I remember before they transported me, they let me hug my mom and say bye to her. And I didn't realize that this was going to be the last time I was going to see my mom in a long time. So, but I hugged her and they took me away. And I remember at the Pueblo State Hospital, it was actually really fun there. I was on what was called the locked adolescent unit, not the locked adolescent. I was on the open adolescent unit, which was pretty much for residents, for youth who weren't there on who had a charge against it, like a charge against them and had to do jail time, and we were just there for psychiatric reasons. And I remember the unit door was always open. That's why it's called the open adolescent unit. And I remember they used to take us, like, they had like movie nights, they had video games, they had a swimming pool at the recreational center that also had a basketball court and a bowling alley. It was like a full rec center. They had a workout room. Like, it was a lot of fun. And they also had an arts and crafts center too there. And it was kind of like being at a camp, sort of. And I remember I really liked it there. I was there for 2 months. And I remember during that 2 months, my mom came in the front door one day when we were about to transition to go to the cafeteria for lunch. And my mom came in and she walked up to me and got down on one knee and started to beg me to come home with her. And I felt really embarrassed, and I remember the other kids in the unit started making fun of me about it. And I found out later from my stepdad that the state hospital was afraid that my mom was going to come in and kidnap me. So they talked my stepdad into signing over my mom's rights. They said temporarily, but they talked him into signing over my mom's rights, and so they could start looking for a foster home for me to send me to. And yeah, so I ended up going into foster care, and thank God that God blessed me with some godly foster parents named Randy and Carolyn Lugenbiel, who really showed me a lot of love and care and compassion. Like, I know it could have gone horribly wrong, because I've heard some horror stories of foster parents who mistreated their foster kids. I wasn't one of those stories. I had very good foster parents. They were godly foster parents who actually cared about the kids that were entrusted in their care. And I remember this was my first experience of actually going to church every Sunday. And their type of church was very unique because it was a house church. And I remember the pastor of the house church was a woman named Ursula. She was a German woman named Ursula with a very thick German accent. And I remember um, she would preach every Sunday, but on Sundays where she wouldn't preach, she would put on a tape for us to watch from I think it was David Wilkerson, like his church in New York City, and we would watch that instead. But that wasn't all the time. That was every now and then. But yeah, and I remember when I was in foster care, this is when I met my foster brothers. That that I would live with the whole time. I had other foster brothers that were there that came and went, but my foster brothers that I lived with on a consistent basis were Sean and AJ, who were brothers who would later become adopted. Then there was Patrick, and then there was their biological son Jordan, and um yeah, like, and but they ended up getting legal custody of Patrick. So but yeah, but I lived with them consistently, and I remember like I remember like over time we ended up growing close to each other. We became like family, and we had our squabbles and everything, but we became like family. And actually, I'm actually friends on Facebook with one of my foster brothers to this very day. But yeah. And then I remember my first year in the foster home, I became very despondent because I was missing my mom. And I remember I was sitting in the driveway of foster home for a long time, like in the like at nighttime, just staring at the sky because I really missed my mom and I wanted to see my mom, and like I would just be thinking about her. Like this was around the time when I was first diagnosed with clinical depression, and I was put on an antidepressant medication, which did absolutely nothing for me except cause me to gain weight. Like it didn't do anything about my emotions at all. And then this is also where I had my first visual hallucination in school. Like I had a hallucination of a giant fly that would just sit there and laugh at me. But it said nothing, but it would sit there and laugh at me. And I didn't know what it was at first. I didn't know what was going on. I just tried to ignore it. But it wasn't doing anything to me. It was just sitting there laughing at me. And I just ignored it. And then I remember I started eighth grade at this school called Emerson Edison Charter Academy. And with my foster brother Sean, I really hated that school because they expected us to wear uniforms. And it wasn't like an actual uniform with like a tie and all that. It was more like a tan. It was like more like a polo shirt with like tan or slacks, tan pants or blue slacks, blue or black slacks, and like dress shoes. But I hated that school so much. I really hated it. And like, I was always complaining about that school. Like, I hated it so much. But, and then later that year, I was having supervised visits with my mom. And later that year, I was supposed to have a supervised visit with my mom and my stepdad and my therapist on Christmas, but my mom never showed up. My stepdad showed up, and I was wondering, I was like, where's my mom? And they told me that my mom didn't show up because she was arrested because she put notes around Memorial Park on people's cars saying that Chins Up, which was the foster care agency that was over me, she put notes saying that Chins Up was slitting my wrists. And when the police investigated, they found that it wasn't true, and they arrested her. And I remember I was so devastated. I just cried the whole entire visit. Like I was so sad. Like I didn't know what was going on. And, like yeah, and this is when I found out from my therapist Nancy Middleton that my mom had schizophrenia and bipolar or schizoaffective disorder, and I I didn't understand what that meant even after she explained it to me. So she ended up showing me this movie called A Beautiful Mind with John with it was a it was with Russell Crowe. It's a true story about a man named John Nash who was a brilliant mathematician, um, and he had suffered with schizophrenia, and that movie quickly became my favorite movie of all time because I was able to relate to both. Well, at the time, I was only able to relate to Alicia Nash's wife, like the way she was feeling. Nowadays, I like the movie because I can relate to both John Nash and Alicia. But back then, I was able to really identify with Alicia Nash. That movie to this day has become my all-time favorite movie. Like, I love that movie so much. Um, I remember towards the end of my eighth grade year at Emerson Edison, I did a we they did a fundraiser because they wanted to take us to Elitch Garden Six Flags amusement park in Denver, Colorado. So they had us do a fundraiser where we sold America's best chocolate bars. And I remember this is when found out that I was actually really good at selling. Like, because I would sell the chocolate bars to people really easily. People would just buy it from me. And my foster dad noticed this too, that I was really good at selling. So in the beginning of my high school years at Wasson High School, my foster dad started sending me to school with large bags of candy to sell to the students. My foster dad let me decide the prices of the candy myself. And I remember everybody in school started calling me the Candy Man because I was always coming to school with these large bags of candy to sell to the kids. And I got really good at sneaking around selling candy to the kids. Um, and my foster dad would use the money that I earned to put towards what he called a fun fund, which he would use to take the family on bowling trips and to the movies, out to eat and camping and stuff like that. Um, and then around this time, I was given by Chins Up, I was given a mentor named Dave. I don't know what his last name was, but they gave me a mentor. He was kind of like a big brother before there was big brother, big sister. Um, and he would take me on like hiking trips. He took me to the Olympic Training Center. He did a lot with me. Like, I really enjoyed my time spent with him, and I really appreciated him a lot. Like, uh, I remember around this time, my hallucinations of the giant fly kept persisting, and one day, like I kept ignoring the giant fly, and then one day, the giant fly literally started moving towards me, and I started backing up, and I took off running down the hall because it started chasing me down the hall. And I told my psychiatrist about this at the time, but he did nothing. And I remember during this time, I had frequent hospital stays due to suicidal ideation. I was trying to commit suicide on many occasions because I didn't want to live anymore, because I didn't want to live without my mom. I was tired of feeling the depression, and yeah. And then I remember during my sophomore year, my mom was doing really well, and I was doing really well during my sophomore year. And our visits were going so well that Chins Up decided to allow me to have an unsupervised visit with my mom and stepdad on Thanksgiving one day. And um I remember during this I don't remember much about that day, but I remember during this time my mom sat me down at the dinner table after Thanksgiving after the dinner, and I don't know if my mom was just unstable at this time. Like, I asked her about this later, and she has no recollection of this incident. So I think that she was just having a delusion at this time. But she told me at this time, at that dinner table, she said that when I was a baby, my mom, um, my mom licked my penis when I was a baby, and she said she was very deeply sorry about what she did. She said she saw it on TV, and she thought it was okay to do, and she felt really bad for what she did. She was very sorry. She wanted to ask for my forgiveness. And I remember I was completely shocked by this. Like, I didn't know what to expect. And to this day, I never told anybody about this incident. And it was just very, I felt really low about this. But yeah, this was around the time I started acting out and talking back to my foster parents and getting into fights with my foster brothers. Like I was really starting to act out. Like before this, I was somewhat of a good kid. I didn't really get into too much trouble. And I started sneaking out in the middle of the night just so I could be by myself. And I also began stress eating too after soon after that too. And then um I remember around this time my mom's mental health started to decline again, and when it was obvious that she wasn't going to get better, DHS or Chins Up decided to start looking for my biological father. Um, yeah, so they started looking for my biological father, and they found him. And actually, this is where I'm going to end this video because I'm at the 25-minute mark. Um, so the next video I'll pick up, I'm going to start talking about my dad. But so if you stuck it through and you watched this to the very end, I appreciate it. Thank you very much for doing so. Um, I really thank you. Please check out my Twitter account, my Tumblr account, and my blog, my Christian Apologetics blog site. I'll post the links to these in the description box below. And also, please check out my Patreon account. If you find merit in this ministry and you want to give to this ministry, please check out the Patreon account. You can give any amount that you feel led by the Lord. And if you do get to the Patreon account, it'll give you exclusive content such as a daily devotional for faith and mental illness between Monday and Friday. And it'll also give you access to a private Discord community for online peer supports and fellowship with other believers who suffer with mental illness or who know people who suffer with mental illness. All right, thank you very much. The link to the Patreon account will be in the description box below, so you can check that out for yourself. All right, thank you very much. Have a nice day and stay blessed. All right, bye.